afternoon, everyone. House Taxation Committee will come to order. First item on the agenda is request for bill introductions. For once, I do not have a judiciary bill to introduce. Are there any other? Seeing no request for bill introductions, we will move on to our first item of business for the day, which is a hearing on Senate Bill 71. And I would turn to the revisor's office first for an overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 71 would establish a new tax credit for contributions to the Eisenhower Foundation. It would be referred to as the Eisenhower Foundation Contribution Credit. The credit amounts would equal 50% of the total amount contributed during the taxable year by a taxpayer subject to income tax or privilege tax would be eligible for the credit. And the limits on the credit would be that there would be a $25,000 limit per taxpayer, per income tax payer on individuals, and a $50,000 credit per year for corporations. And, the aggregate limit would be $350,000 for any fiscal year would be the amount of credit that could possibly be earned. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sievers. Committee, any questions for the revisor's office? Adam, this is not the first time we've seen this bill. It's kind of got caught up in some legislation in prior years. Has anything changed in this version versus what we've seen before in committee? Perhaps Mr. Chairman, some of the proponents could answer that too.
Yeah, that's probably better. I know the numbers have kind of fluctuated throughout the years, so I can't say nothing's changed, but you're right. This bill, or remnants of this bill, have been around for a couple of years now.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will turn to the Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note, please.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue is estimating that Senate Bill 71 would decrease state general fund revenues by $350,000 in fiscal year 2022, with a similar fiscal effect in future years. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Probably one of the most straightforward fiscal notes we've seen. So thank you, Kathleen. This time we will open up proponent section of testimony for Senate Bill 71, and I'd like to invite to committee first Representative John Barker. Welcome to committee, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I've got a light on, so I guess I have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Smith, Vice Chairman Mason, Ranking Member Jim Gardner, and distinguished members. When I was serving on this committee the last few years, we were downstairs. Actually, I went down there this morning, or this afternoon, and said, it's not here. So I saw you coming upstairs, so I thought, that's right, you're in the old Supreme Court where I meet every morning with my committee. I'm here today to support Senate Bill 71, giving a tax credit to the Eisenhower Foundation. As many of you who've served on this committee in the past knows that this is not the first time this bill has come before the committee. The Eisenhower Foundation and the Eisenhower Library and boyhood home of President Dwight D. Eisenhower was located in Abilene, Dixon County, Kansas. The Eisenhower Library is one of the most premier tourist attractions for the state of Kansas, and I would assert that he is probably the most famous Kansan that this state has ever produced. I would remark that he was not born in Abilene, but he came to Abilene when he was 6 months old, and his parents had lived in Abilene prior. So we claim him, although there's some place in Texas that has a little monument to him that tries to do that. But this is not the first time. Several years ago, we did have a tax credit. I know because I purchased some of the tax credits. The Eisenhower Foundation is a great foundation to keep the legacy of Kansas's most favorite son relevant. But there's others here. I know his granddaughter, Mary Eisenhower, is here, along with Meredith Schlechter, who is the executive director of the Eisenhower Foundation. But I can't go away. My testimony is over, but I got to tell one Eisenhower story. And I read this in Brett Baer's book, who does the news on Fox News. He came to the Eisenhower Library. He wrote a book. Very interesting, and I would suggest it. But when President Eisenhower left office, I really have two stories. He left office. Mamie, his wife, had bought him a Chrysler Imperial, 1959, I think. When he didn't drive, of course, for years. But they got into it and drove to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where his farm's at. The Secret Service followed him. As soon as he got to the farm, the Secret Service said, "Thank you, Mr. President. It's been a pleasure to serve you." And they turned around and drove back to D.C. because at that time, he was not entitled to Secret Service protection. I think that's interesting. The other thing that I think is interesting is he had an aide who had been with him for years. When he became an ex-president, who he sent to President Kennedy and said, "I would like to be reinstated as 5-star general." And you've read the story then, it looks like. And the president asked, "Well, he'll always be known as Mr. President or Mr. Former President." And the response was, "They've been 34 presidents. They've only been 5-star generals." I would prefer that I would be referred to as general. But he was a military man as well as a public servant. With that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Representative Barker, do you need to go to a...
I need to go. There's one other thing that's in my testimony. I'd like to keep this bill a clean bill. I will tell you that. As we all know, that we start adding amendments to bills, there's less likelihood the bill would pass. But of course, I will leave it to the committee at your pleasure, but I felt I needed to just say that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Barker, out of respect for your time, if you need to go, I would take questions for you right now.
Yeah, if that's agreeable to the members.
Okay. Yes, committee, any questions for Representative Barker?
I did a good job.
You did a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Our next conferee, as a proponent, would like to welcome to committee Meredith Schlechter, Executive Director for the Eisenhower Foundation. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I submitted some written testimony, and so I trust you've had an opportunity to read that. But the testimony shares the way that our colleagues at the Truman Library have received tax credit support through the state of Missouri. And so I hope that you'll all consider this tax credit for us. And the burden of the tax credit, if this comes to pass, is actually on the foundation, because it's up to us to be able to find donors who want to receive those tax credits. So the burden is passed on to us to be able to do that. And with that, I will stand for any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you. Any committee, any questions for this conferee? Representative Corbett.
Thank you for coming today. Seeing from your notes here, 147,000 visitors and the amount of tourism and what it does for the state of Kansas. It's truly an asset, and I hope you get this bill passed.
Thank you very much.
Representative Helgerson.
Did you come up with an economic impact of tourism?
In the written testimony that I shared with you, I said that Dickinson County, we pulled some numbers from the Kansas Department of Wildlife Parks and Tourism. And so visitor spending through that in Dickinson County was $22.93 million. And that was in 2019.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Our next proponent conferee, I'd like to welcome to committee Jessica Lucas, President, Friends of Cedar Crest Association. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, members. My name is Jessica Lucas, and I am the President of the Friends of Cedar Crest Association, which is the association that oversees the governor's residence. We are an all-volunteer board, so I am here today in my capacity as a volunteer serving in that role. I also want to acknowledge Angie Merritt Marichal, who's in the back with her son Evan. She is one of our board members from Topeka, and also appreciate that Representative Gartner is here with us today, a former board member of the Friends of Cedar Crest Association. So I am here, I have included a lot of information in the testimony I provided just about the Cedar Crest residents. The reason I am here today, and with all respect for Representative Barker on keeping things a clean bill, in my day job that brings me here, have bills I've introduced that I certainly would love to see kept clean, but I recognize that some of our best legislation is being able to take a lot of really good ideas and put it together and move it forward as one. And that is what we are here asking. We 100% support this bill and the opportunity for the Eisenhower Foundation to utilize tax credits, but would ask that you also consider, when you work this bill, in adopting an amendment that would include the Friends of Cedar Crest Association under the same parameters as we are providing in this legislation for the Eisenhower Foundation. I believe this is really important and gives us an opportunity to address some immediate needs at the home. It was renovated in 2000 and since then has seen very little done in the way of updates. So we have some immediate needs, particularly on the first floor, but thinking bigger picture and thinking long term, these resources will enable us to establish an endowment. And I think that's so important as we think about making sure we're getting the best use of our resources and that we're earning that investment income and able to use that and not consistently coming back and asking for assistance from the state to do some of the interior maintenance that has not been done and is needed. So with that, I will stop there and answer any questions that you have, and appreciate again your consideration and believe this is an opportunity for two great institutions in our state to benefit from a tax credit structure.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions for this conferee? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming. Are you asking for identical consideration to not exceed $350,000? Everything's identical that you're asking, just amend in Cedar Crest?
Yes, correct. We would just ask that it's the very same.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jessica, thanks for being here. And how long have you been president of Friends of Cedar Crest?
I believe 3 years, but probably 4 if you count the COVID year that has really seen not a lot of action.
Right, and you have, normally you have a fundraiser every year, correct? The Friends of Cedar Crest?
We do. We formally, when I came on the board, there was an annual Christmas party at Cedar Crest that folks were invited to. And while it was a lovely time to come to the home, we made the decision as a board a couple of years ago to move that to Kansas Day. So we are celebrating Kansas Day at the residence every year. It has been a lovely opportunity. We wish we had had that this year, so especially those of you who are new would have had the opportunity to come to the home. It's been wildly successful. The timing is perfect because I think a lot of the folks here in the building are deeply invested in Cedar Crest and that history, and it means a lot to them. So it's been great timing. My favorite part of that event is that we utilize the culinary students from the Johnson County School District, and they come and do all the food. And so I look forward to being able to do that again next year and having all of you come in for that.
Thanks, Jessica. Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. Cedar Crest, of course, the governor's mansion is in my district. That's why I felt like I wanted to be on the Friends of Cedar Crest board. But if you haven't been there, it's a great, great home. But as Jessica pointed out, it's been 21 years since the update, and we need to spend some money on Cedar Crest to make it really a great governor's mansion. But I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Wassinger.
I want to thank you and Meredith for being here. As a proud Eisenhower woman, and one of my classmates is in the audience, as well as her husband serving on this. I think it's important that we take care of our historical areas in our state. And if we can do it without physically giving them money and encouraging donations from others, I think it's a wise choice. So I'm asking Representative Barker, maybe we could do a separate one for Cedar Crest so we could make his clean, but I don't have a problem with either. So thank you very much for being here.
Representative Sanders.
So, Jessica, following up on that, by way of full disclosure, I am a friend of Judge John Barker's. We're in neighboring districts. So if I were to support you in this call for an amendment, what would you suggest I tell him when he asks me about that?
Well, I had this conversation with Representative Barker, but I think you say you took the opportunity to vote for two great historical institutions in the state. And, you know, these aren't competing. We often put additional things into bills that we think are good ideas. This is an excellent opportunity. And so I feel good about it. Representative Barker said he recognized it was a good thing, and I respect that. And like I said, I bring legislation before this body, and I always want it to come out clean. Every lobbyist standing behind me is hoping that their bill comes out untouched, just like they brought it. So I understand that and fully respect it. But I also know that we do take good ideas and we put them together and we move those forward for the benefit of everyone. And this has that potential to do that. One thing I forgot to mention about the House that I don't think everyone always knows, but we are the smallest square footage residents of all the 50 gubernatorial residences in the U.S., but the largest footprint of property. So we have amazing acreage, but we do have the tiniest home. And again, it is a beautiful home, but it is worthy of our investment. And that investment should come from private donors as opposed to state taxpayers. And so I appreciate the opportunity that we can really do that, and that I'm not here next year saying, I'm sorry, but we need some SGF money to help take care of things at Cedar Crest.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. As another graduate of the Eisenhower Women Program, 2010, great class. But in any case, I do want to say that I emphatically support the underlying bill, but as someone who comes from the historic site industry, I think that this does offer good opportunities for Cedar Crest as well, and I will be standing in support of this. Again, anytime we can have these important historic sites getting this type of assistance that does not require for us to fund it, I think that that fosters independence, and I will definitely be standing in strong support of the underlying bill and of the amendment. And I'd be happy to talk to any of my other Eisenhower sisters in office and see if we can't, get something to happen. Thank you.
That. One other thing to know that I feel we as Friends of Cedar Crest Association are also putting our skin in the game. We are not a tax-exempt nonprofit. So anytime that we make a purchase for the residents, we do pay tax on that. So I'm happy to address that in future years, but I know that tax exemptions are not necessarily something we want to tackle. So I ask you that, again, with this, that makes it a lot easier for me to sleep when we're paying sales tax as we make updates to the state's governor's residents.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we ask a question of the other conferee who's present?
Certainly. If you.
So, Meredith, would you view such an amendment as a friendly amendment?
Mr. Sanders, for the question. And again, this is all coming at me because I just heard this for the first time as she's standing up here. So the opportunity for Friends of Cedar Crest, I don't see it as a competing entity. And as long as the bill itself gives both entities the same opportunity and it's not taking away opportunity from one or the other, I am fine with that. Personally, this has been 4 years in the making, and it's been a long haul for 4 years. So to have another organization just come in and tack on like this seems very easy. It wasn't easy to get to this point. That's all, thank you.
So would you see it as a friendly amendment?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, it would be. It's personally, because for me personally, to be here 4 years in a row to try and do this bill, and get it finally to this point where it feels like we're in the home stretch for it. It feels good. It was a lot of work to get here, and it is a bill, I think, that if it's successful for our organizations, I could see this as a funding mechanism in the future as well for other entities. So I would love to be the model to prove that as a successful model.
If I may interject just a little bit, a lot of times what happens when you have a relatively simple bill like this, especially in tax committee, it gets bundled up with sales tax and income tax and all this other stuff in a big mega tax bill that fails for multiple reasons. So this amendment still would be a fairly limited amendment. I have no intention of sticking this into a mega tax bill, so I think that impacts a lot of what happens to some of the smaller bills as they all get shoved in and time runs short. We stick everything in one big bill and it either passes or fails. And unfortunately, I mean, I've had bills that are victim to that too. It's a tough situation, and as the chair, I want to respect every bill that comes through here and try to give it its own merit. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since you came back to the microphone, I was going to ask you a question that I didn't get in the first time, but how was the sizing of 350? How was that decided? Is there a work plan or a visioned build out with exhibits that kind of came to that being the right number?
Well, actually, the original bill was, we asked for a 70% tax credit. And so then, of course, through the process of debating, it was down to 50%. And so 50%, if we were to be able to issue all $350,000 worth of tax credit, that would generate $700,000 for us. And to give you a sense of our annual budget, right now, we have about $1 million annual budget. And so this will help us not only with our next step, which is to find another or build an Ike Education Center, but also then for our long-term planning in terms of being able to have some money that we can put into an endowment, as she said before, for future funding that we'll have as sort of sustainability funding.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, are there any further questions? We do have several bills, so I'll take one last question from Representative Blex, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your coming down. I know it's a long ways. That I guess I kind of maybe just have a comment in general. I'm a pretty strong fiscal conservative, but this is my 5th year, and it still gets to me at night when I come in and see our Capitol lit up. I mean, it's an emotional thing, and I hear people across the United States that says, hey, you know, Kansas is in the top 5 of really beautiful capital, and we spent a ton of money, probably more than I would even want to know, but it made this building beautiful. And I feel the same way about these Kansas treasures, I call them, that we need to preserve them, and we need to make them sure that they're a good tourist facility and they're suitable for people that want to come. And so I am totally in support of this, even though I don't like spending money, but I think tax credit is probably at least a good way and approach. I appreciate you bringing that, and I thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony.
Yes, thank you.
No surprise, I show no opponents to Senate Bill 71. So is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of Senate Bill 71? Yes, Mary. Welcome to committee.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the chance to be with you and to at least throw out the family's viewpoint on this. So it's not going to be impact or anything like that. It's more of a personal thing. We're so thrilled that this bill is passed not only once but twice with the Senate. And thanks to COVID, we're still talking about it, but that's kind of the way the last year went. And I thank everybody for all your support, not only from the Eisenhower Foundation and the Presidential Library, but also the Eisenhower family. Having personally known Dwight Eisenhower and as the baby of the family, there was much talk around the home about current events and the things that were going on. They were scary things, which included the Cold War, nuclear threat, and I might add, I hate to say this, I'm old enough that I was the first generation to never experience life without a nuclear threat. But I even had the experience of meeting Nikita Khrushchev as a little girl. This took place at the Eisenhower farm on the same trip where Khrushchev was a little bit cranky and pounded his shoe on the podium at the UN. Granddad brought him to the farm in Gettysburg to show him America, apart from the obvious cities such as New York, Los Angeles, and Washington. I remember the visit to Gettysburg. As I said, Khrushchev was a little bit on the cranky side, and there was an intense verbal altercation between the two of them, which truly frightened me, because first of all, I had never seen my grandfather angry. I was one of the grandchildren. We couldn't do anything wrong. So it was the first time I ever saw his face blood red. And when he was with family, that was all that mattered. And he fiercely protected us to ensure a normal, quote unquote normal, childhood for us. What was said between the two of them apart from us apparently was pretty hefty. And in the days following, Granddad was concerned about us and what we saw. As a child, I, of course, cleaved to him under any, scary situation because he exuded strength, compassion, solutions, and heart. He developed these characteristics from his childhood experiences in Abilene. There's no question in my mind about that. His love of country, and he cherished growing up there because of his Kansas values that he brought forward to us. I always slept with the security of knowing if he said it would be all right, it would be all right. And in fact, after everything that he had been through in his entire life, growing up, the many stories I heard out of him, I don't remember any of the war stories. All I remember is Abilene and how much he loved it and what they did as kids. So there's no doubt that his ability to diplomatically handle tense intellectual situations, which included World War II, 8 years of presidency, working across the aisle, and dealing with all of the international personalities that he drew on his roots and upbringing in Abilene. He was not privileged in this state, but he treasured it and drew on it all of his life. At the end of World War II, he said, "The proudest thing I can say is that I come from Abilene." As a fairly new resident to Abilene myself, 2 years, I have wanted to, and I hate to give my age away again, but I have wanted to live there for 50 years, literally or 52 years, since the day we buried him in Abilene. I have been in love with it because of the things that he said about it. And I have to say, I am thrilled that he was absolutely right. He loved Kansas so that he came here to announce that he would run for the presidency. He established one of the first national presidential libraries right in Abilene, and he chose to rest here permanently, next to the home that he treasured and grew up in. It was in Kansas that he learned a love of the prairies, the belief in the resilience of the everyday citizen, the love of life, and the responsibility to allow people to take care of each other. I would like to state a direct quote from his farewell speech to the nation from January 17th, 1961. It's the same speech that he warns about a military-industrial complex. However, this last paragraph, which encompasses his heart, there's no question about that. And they were actually his last official words as President of the United States. We pray that peoples of all faiths, all races, and all nations may have their great human needs satisfied. Those now denied opportunity shall come to enjoy it to the full. That all who yearn for freedom may experience its spiritual blessings. That those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibilities. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity. That the scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made to disappear from the earth, and that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. This country needs more than ever to know and understand these values and how they translate into today's terms, which is more significant than ever, at least in my lifetime. Your support will represent a nonpartisan effort to continue to responsibly bring education and Eisenhower's American values forward, with Kansas at the root. Many thanks for your time and consideration, and I give you my prayer for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Would you stand for any questions, if there are any? First of all, thank you very much for that personal side. That means
I felt I can't speak to a lot of legislation. You know, that's not my forte, but I thought you might want to know about the guy.
Yeah. The committee, are there any questions?
Oh, good.
Thank you very much. Yes, Merrill, would you like to address the committee?
Mr. Chairman, that is my mom, by the way. I'm claiming her today for sure. I know how this process goes. I've been around a lot of you I know very well, some of you not so well, but those I don't know, I look forward to meeting you in the future. To answer your question directly, not necessarily a hostile bill, but we've been working a really long time to get this done. The reason why is because what hasn't been said today is the educational aspect that the library does by itself. Number one, the library educates kids all around Kansas every single year through the foundation alone. The foundation isn't funded by the state government. The foundation isn't funded by federal government. It relies on its donor base in order to even operate. That is a big difference between the two organizations. I'm not saying Friends of Cedar Crest isn't a worthy organization, but the bill should be a standalone bill. That's all I have to say.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of Senate Bill 71? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 71 and move to our next item of business, a hearing on House Bill 2414. And I would turn to the revisor's office for a quick overview, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2414 would increase the current percentage that is available as a credit under the Child Daycare Services Assistance Tax Credit. Currently, a taxpayer, that provides a facility for child daycare services or the operation of a facility is entitled to a credit of 50% for the first year and 30% for expenses after year one. The bill would increase the amount of the credit available to equal 50% for expenses for all years. So it kind of make it an equal 50% across the board. Additionally, the bill provides for a credit of 50% of the amount expended by a taxpayer as payments to an organization providing access to available child daycare services for the taxpayer's employees. The maximum amount of the credit available for such taxpayer would be $45,000. And then lastly, the bill would allow the credit to be utilized by all taxpayers subject to the privilege or income tax. Currently, only corporate taxpayers are eligible for the credit. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the fiscal note and look to Department of Revenue for an overview on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue is estimating that House Bill 2414 would decrease state general fund revenues by $89,000 in fiscal year 2022 and would have the same results in future fiscal years as well. To come up with that estimate, we reviewed historical data that we have on this credit and came up with the $89,000. With that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you once again, Kathleen. Committee, any questions on the fiscal note? Seeing none, we will open up proponent testimony on House Bill 2414. Committee, we have several conferees, so we We will take questions at the end of all conferees, and in the interest of time, I don't like to time anybody that is presenting testimony, but if you would hit your key points, your high points of your testimony, and we'll take questions at the end. First conferee, I'd like to welcome to committee Representative Vaughn. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, and thank you for having me in committee. I subbed not that long ago, and I'm excited to be back. So I appreciate you all taking the time today. As requested, I will keep it sweet and short to the point. I am here on behalf of the Early Learning Caucus in support of House Bill 2414. We're a bipartisan group of legislators who advocate for increasing access to high-quality learning opportunities for all children from ages 0 to 5 across the state of Kansas. We know that 90% of brain development occurs by the age of 5, and so it's really important that we have early education opportunities for our kids to ensure their long-term success. So, as the revisers talked about, there are some 3 important things that this bill does. It would expand access for additional types of for-profit businesses to access this credit, which currently already exists. So currently, C-Corp businesses and businesses eligible for privilege tax are eligible to receive this tax credit, but S-Corps and small businesses, for example, are not. So this bill would expand access for those individuals, or those for-profit businesses, and then it increases the tax credit to 50% for all years. And then also importantly, I'd like to point out that it does not change the aggregate amount that the tax credit, or of tax credits that are already available. So the fiscal note is for, I believe, FTE positions, but not for the tax credit itself. So in closing, I'd just like to say, we know that the demand for childcare continues to outpace supply across Kansas, and it's also often prohibitively expensive for many families. So mixed delivery, including allowing businesses to offer this type of childcare, is a huge asset for meeting this ongoing need in our state. And by allowing businesses to take advantage of this important tax credit, we can help prevent people from dropping out of the workforce if they have this type of service. And it also provides a really significant benefit for employers to offer to their employees. And, I think that's good. What's good for children and families is great for businesses and for all Kansans. So I encourage your support for this bill, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Our next conferee is Mitch Rucker with the Early Learning Policy, or he is the Early Learning Policy Advisor. Mitch, are you joining us virtually?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here on WebEx. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Great. Chairman Smith, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of House Bill 2414. I am the Early Learning Policy Advisor at Kansas Action for Children. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization based in Topeka. We work on issues that help Kansas kids and the adults who care for them. In the interest of time, I believe you have my written testimony, so I'll try not to duplicate that. But did want to provide some background as to why we have this credit and why it's important, and a couple key points about the bill itself. It's the child care system in Kansas has been under duress for some time, and the recent pandemic has only worsened some pre-existing problems. The cost of infant care in this state rivals that of college tuition. At the same time, child care businesses operate on incredibly thin margins, with providers making, on average, $9.25 an hour. So to say it in a soundbite, parents can't afford to pay more, and providers cannot afford to make less. As a result, if a family can't afford high-quality childcare, or if it's simply not available nearby, it's really the child who suffers by losing out on the lifelong benefits that high-quality childcare imparts to them. It's a big problem. It's going to take a multifaceted approach to solve, and I think that House Bill 2414 is an important component of that. The previous speaker, Representative, explained the key components well, so I won't duplicate that. Did want to provide some context. When this credit was created in 1991, all businesses were eligible for the credit. That change was made to limit it to C corporations and privileged taxpayers as a result of some tax changes that took effect in 2013. When those business types were taken off of the income tax rolls, they were excluded from accessing this credit, which makes sense since they didn't have any income tax liability at that point. But when those businesses were put back on the tax rolls in 2017, eligibility for this credit was not restored. And so this bill would correct that. I think the real nifty part of this bill is the inclusion of the cost of working with a shared services provider as an eligible expense. I think that is something that's new-ish to Kansas. Essentially, if an employer would like to provide childcare for their employees, but they don't really want to get into the business of running a childcare operation, they could work with early learning childcare professionals to run the administrative, the operational sides of things for them, so they could still have that care, but they wouldn't have to, learn how to run a childcare facility, which is really hard work. And so this would allow them to access the same credit as if they were operating it themselves. So with that, I thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon and would stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Rucker. Our next conferee is Vicki Roper with the Kansas Children's Service League. I'm not seeing her online.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, and I see you now. Vicki? I can see her online, but we'll give her a few moments to see if we can get active here.
All right.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm Vicki Roper. I'm the Prevent Child Abuse Kansas Director for the Kansas Children's Service League. Our mission is to protect and to promote the well-being of children, and we are the Kansas chapter of Prevent Child Abuse America. I am chair of the Kansas Power of the Positive, which is a coalition of 40 member agencies, and our task is to work with business leaders to help create more family-friendly workplaces here in Kansas. We have been out doing public engagement and education campaigns with over 3,000 participants, most of which are from businesses, from Rotary clubs, from chambers of commerce, from employers in Kansas of all sizes. And what we're hearing is exactly what's being addressed today as they think that they want an opportunity to be a part of this and to receive the tax credit, and they want an opportunity for shared services to be provided. We also have done an employee survey that many of our employers have started to implement around the state that is showing us that 60% of our Kansas employees who are being surveyed want subsidized childcare, that childcare is an issue for them, that it's a problem for them, and it's one that really needs to be addressed, as Mitch Rucker shared a little bit earlier. This bill addresses the problem of insufficient childcare, and what we're seeing is that that is a huge issue, not only in Kansas, but around the country. The Kansas Child Death Review Board, which is the body charged by statute to review all child abuse homicides, has put out in both their 2019 and 2020 reports that a lot of our fatalities in Wichita, it's half the fatalities, have been at the hands of a perpetrator that's usually a significant other of the primary caregiver. And their recommendations the last 2 years, actually the last several years, have been that we need to look at quality child care in this state as a response to that. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, in their 2019 document, Creating Strong Partnerships for Early Childhood Education, sees this as an economic development issue. They say that in a 2018 report when they looked at this and took a deep dive that an astounding $57 billion per year was lost in revenue, wages, and productivity as a result of issues related to childcare. We also are hearing from our young parents, and they are wanting this, you know, in the workplace. The millennials seem to really want this. And so what we would like to see happen is for this bill would really make businesses a part of the community solutions in their community, make them a major partner with early childhood, which is a recommendation of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and help address childcare availability, affordability, accessibility in this state. So thank you for your time and consideration, and I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next conferee is Joshua Zinger with Kansas Citizen. Welcome to committee.
Honorable Chairman Smith, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I come to you in support of House Bill 2414. As a resident of Leavenworth County, a father of 3, and most importantly, a 11-year member of the child care industry. I serve on the oversight board for a not-for-profit child care in Leavenworth County, with 21 employees and over 150 children that we serve at 3 locations. The important part of this bill, and I'm not going to touch on everything because Representative Fawn and others have spoken so eloquently on it, but the important fact is that child care centers themselves and child care providers themselves are some of the most frequent corporate and small businesses that provide these kinds of benefits to their own employees. And so this particular bill would help address the shortage that is so critical, as spoken online, about availability, reliability, affordability, and proximity. Parents spend too much time driving to and from work out of the direction they should be going to drop off children at child cares. Yes, I help run a child care. Every hour they're there is money in our not-for-profit progress efforts. But I would much rather those children had 2 hours less time with us and more time with their families. So those are the key points, is that we're providing dollars back into an industry that is short in our state and providing opportunities for small business growth. Please, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. And the final conferee that I have as a verbal proponent is John Jenks with the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead, sir.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify in favor of HB 2414 for the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce and our nearly 2,000 members. Again, my name is John Jenks, Director of Public Policy at the KC Chamber. The Chamber supports this bill as it will help encourage more options for child care and assisting employees with child care access, which will help keep people in the workforce. Expanding opportunities for Kansans to gain employment by removing barriers is a win-win for the business community and the state's workforce. Notably, we've also seen historically that a lack of childcare access significantly affects women from entering or staying in the workforce. The coronavirus pandemic and the related closures that we saw from it exacerbated this. Recent economic projections modeled by McKinsey and Oxford Economics estimate that employment for women may not recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2024. A full 2 years after a full recovery for men in the workforce. Furthermore, according to the National Women's Law Center, without significant action such as additional employer support programs, there is a real danger that female labor force participation could face its steepest sustained decline since World War II. Female workforce participation has already dropped to 57%, the lowest level since 1988. With this in mind, and as the economy continues to rebound from the 2020 coronavirus-induced downturn, the KC Chamber believes it is imperative that we find solutions to get more people participating in the workforce. As one of my fellow conferees just cited, workforce development truly is economic development, and in order for the Kansas City region and the state of Kansas to flourish, we must find ways to get people back into the workforce. The chamber believes that with bills like this, Kansas can create a more robust pipeline of workers. The chamber encourages this committee to pass HB 2414 with a favorable recommendation, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a verbal proponent on House Bill 2414? If not, at this time, I will open it up to questions for any of the proponents. Committee, if you have a question, please identify the proponent you would like to ask it of. Are there any questions? We must have done an excellent job. Congratulations, proponents. Committee, I will address your attention to a number of written-only proponents on House Bill 2414. And once again, no surprise, I show no opponents. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of 2414? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2414. Thank you to the conferees for your time and attention today. We will now move on to our next item of business on the day, a hearing on House Bill 2423, and I would turn to the revisor's office for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2423 is the biannual extension of the 20 mills that generally go for school finance. It also extends it by 2 years. That's the practice. It goes on a 2-year continuum. And then it also extends the $20,000 exemption for residential property, the first $20,000 in appraised valuation. That also would extend for 2 additional years. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, we will. Does the Department of Revenue wish to address? There's not really much of a fiscal note on this, but is there anything the Department of Revenue would like to add?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. I was going to refer you to the note that was prepared by the Division of Budget. So.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. This time, we will open up the proponent section of our testimony and welcome first to committee former Representative Jim Carlskent, now representing USA, Kansas. Welcome to committee and welcome back to the Capitol, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a joy to be here with you today. I am Jim Carlskent, and I recognize there's many familiar faces in this room. For those of you that do not know me, I served in this body. In fact, I sat in this room many hours, right where Representative Clayton is when I served on Fed and State. And in fact, I sat next to Representative Clayton, and I learned a lot about texting and Twitter while I was in this room. But the reason for my presence today is to support House Bill 2423, and as the revisor just indicated, is a statewide mill levy for the foundation of and basically it's a foundation for the school tax formula, and we certainly support that. In my testimony, my written testimony, I made an error, and I need to point that out. My main purpose here is to talk about Senate Bill 13, and in my testimony I indicated that the date yesterday, when I wrote the testimony, the date was moved from the 15th to the 25th of July. Well, that's incorrect, because this morning, it was moved back from the 25th to the 15th. And my concern is that it is very difficult for school districts, and I represent United School Administrators, which includes superintendents and finance people. It's very difficult to create a budget to meet the deadline of July 15th. And allow me to explain to you, don't want to take a lot of your time, but explain the difficulties. By June the 15th, counties are supposed to notify school districts of their budget neutral rate, which they can do without any problem. The concern is when school districts receive budget software, and we receive software. When I say we, I'm a former superintendent, so when I was a superintendent, we would receive the software late June, say from the 20th to the 25th. This is prepared by now Mr. Newen-Swander's office, used to be Mr. Dennis's office. And then we receive the software, and then budget meetings are held across the state. There's 6 locations for these budget meetings to explain the software and to help the school districts and the clerks, fill out the software. I want to show you a hard copy of the budget. This includes the worksheets. Now, this is not a simple, budget to fill out. It entails a great deal of detail, but after the budget software is received by the school district, they start putting information in. But they cannot do it all until the final payment from the state is received by the school districts. The school district receives that money on about the 7th or 8th of July. At that time, bills are paid, final bills are paid. If there's what money's left over, there has to be transfers made to the budget, and each of those has to be put into here, and there's several different various funds, to put in these places. After this is done, then the clerk or the superintendent or a combination of both, they will need to meet with the school board to determine if they were going to exceed the revenue neutral rate. In the event they exceed the budget, they have to determine whether they're going to exceed the budget neutral rate or the revenue neutral rate or not. That takes deliberation, concerns on, who do you hear from. So from there, a decision has to be made, but a board meeting has to take place. To get all this in place by the 15th of July, I was asked, is it really, really hard, or is it impossible? There are 286 school districts in the state. For some, it's really, really hard. For others, it's impossible. And I think in those school districts where they have a large staff, the bigger school districts, they have the people, they can probably do this. They may be working around the clock to get it finished, but they could do it. But, it's very awkward. We thought we had a place and fix with the Senate to move it to the 25th. We didn't. That was changed today, I believe. The chair there heard from some county clerks with some concern about making the turnaround, because the county clerks, then they have to notify all the taxpayers if they are going to exceed the budget, the revenue neutral rate, which I understand. But you have a member of your committee who probably has some personal experience with developing a budget, and his wife was a superintendent. And Representative Prail, does Linda ever comment to you about preparing the budget? I won't ask you what she says, but anyway, in this time period, it is helpful for us, for school people, whether business managers, clerks, superintendents, to have others look over this budget. And what I did when I was a superintendent, I would contact either Dale Dennis or Verl Peters to meet with me to review the budget. And I know that they still do this 250 times, prior to this. But that needs to be done before July the 15th, too, before you take it to the board. My concern is that superintendents have to be cautious. And they will raise, since they don't have the specifics of it, they may raise the revenue neutral rate above the rate just to protect themselves. Because if you have a budget that does not meet the expenses, they will be updating their resumes. So anyway, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the time of meeting with you and talking with you, and at the appropriate time, I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Committee, due to the detailed discussion here, I think I'll take questions after each conferee. So I would like to start off, Mr. Carlskent, looking at the issue that you addressed of the date. It sounds like the dates that we're looking at are July 7th or 8th, you said, is about when you receive your payment.
Yes.
Is that when you receive the payment? Is there any way to know what that payment is before it's actually received?
The school districts have an approximate, they have an idea of what that amount is, but until those monies are received, they cannot, they can't finalize the previous year's budget, pay the bills, and make the transfers until that money is actually received. They do have an idea, and I would be not upfront with you if I didn't say they didn't. And there is some things in this software that can be completed prior to the 6th or the 7th, but there's still a great deal to be put in. When you've got this many pages of worksheets to put in, and there's so many different funds. School finance is complicated. I'm not going to kid you, it is complicated.
Committee, do you have any questions for this conferee? I do want to ask a few other things. Okay, so the current date that you would have to report, as in Senate Bill 13, which is passed the legislature, it has not been signed by the governor or taken action on by the governor yet.
That's correct.
But, if we're looking at July 7th or 8th, that's basically under the current Senate Bill 13 date, you basically have a week to work.
Yes. Yes.
If it's July 25th, that's obviously a little bit longer, but then that also leaves only a few days for a county clerk to turn that around. And if there's a weekend in there, I think I'd visited with you before the committee. Would a date like July 20th be a happy medium for both the clerks to give them more time, and would an extra 5 days be enough, or do you feel like that would be sufficient?
To say sufficient, for some, it would help. For others, it would still be a challenge, and it would probably be a challenge for the county clerks. I talked to my county clerk this morning about it, and we discussed it, and she didn't certainly embrace it, but it's something that, we don't know what we don't know yet, especially when it comes to, putting a budget together this quick and what the county clerk's going to have to deal with. So the 20th is better than the 15th. Let's put it that way.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see Jim.
And you, Jim.
I was on the school board for 9.5 years, and one of the questions, and I remember our finance gentleman was just smart as a whip, and it still took him a long time to put the budget together because of all the, I guess, different budgets that slide to the total budget. But my main question is, does the state normally pay the money to school districts, get it to the school districts by July 7th or 8th? Or has there been delays in the past that would go beyond that date? I guess that's my question.
There have been, back in the days when I was superintendent, there were a couple times when back in, I think it was like in 2003, then in the hard times of 8 and 9, we had some problems. But if you didn't have the money, because the state couldn't give it to you, you would have to issue no-fund warrants, which is a problem. But it hadn't happened that much, especially since, I'd say, 2010.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Committee, any further questions? If not, Jim, I just wanted to make one more comment. The issue that we had with the July 25th date is for the clerks and the notifications.
Yes.
However, this first year, as the committee may recall, notifications are not a part of Senate Bill 13. That does not kick in until year 2022. So we might be able to find a compromise somewhere in here if we could use a July 25th deadline for this year, see how things go, and if July 20th could be accommodated in the following year when those notifications might have to start going out. There could be some leeway there to give this first year.
You're correct, Mr. Chair. In fact, I mentioned earlier I spoke with the county clerk from my county, and we talked about that very thing, that this year the written notices won't be required. We'll have a better gauge from the school district's perspective as well as the clerk's perspective, and to possibly revisit this year. And being in this body for 4 years, I know we revisited a lot of things, so that would be considerable.
Are you saying we don't get it right the first time?
Mr. Chair, I didn't get it right a lot, but I know you will.
No, thank you. Committee, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee.
Committee, our next conferee, I'd like to welcome to committee Mark Tallman, Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I will be very, very brief. We wanted to appear here as a proponent of the underlying bill because we think it's important to do that reauthorization. This has to be done every 2 years. Second, maybe our apologies. We didn't appear on Senate Bill 13 because at the time we weren't included in the bill. With the House's wisdom in doing that, we've now seen some issues of timeline. We've been trying to simply work with USA and others to come up with a solution to that. I think, simple as it is, any more time that districts would have to put their budget together right would help. We know that pushes up against other deadlines as well. If there are things that can be done to kind of give a year to see how this works, that obviously would be helpful as well. So we just appreciate anything you can do to address these concerns, and I'll take any questions if that's appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, committee, any questions for Mr. Tallman? I did want to address one thing, and Mr. Carlskin, I apologize. Perhaps you can answer this question too, if Mark would like to defer that answer. But one thing we didn't discuss was the statewide 20 mil levy that is levied for the school general fund. Senate Bill 13, it's on page 2 of the bill. It declares that although the state of Kansas is not a taxing subdivision of the state for purposes of this section, the notice shall include a statement of the statutory mill levies imposed by the state and the estimate of the tax. This is the portion of Senate Bill 13 that requires the notification. Now, as we discussed, that won't be implemented until year 2022. However, and this is where Mr. Carlskint may be able to provide us some insight, but the 20 mills is not subject to a board decision. They can't increase that. They cannot decrease that. That is a statutory limit. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is not considered, it's a school district levy, but it is required by the state. And in fact, and I defer to your legal staff, the Supreme Court, the reason you have to do it every 2 years is because the Supreme Court opined that it was a state levy, and under the state constitution, it can only be imposed for a maximum of 2 years. So it's really in a gray area. It's part of the school district budget and total taxes, but the school district has no discretion in what that amount is.
So as Senate Bill 13 is implemented, let's say, because the other part of the school levy is the LOB. If a school district would, let's say they have a drop in valuation, and for some reason they are not exceeding the revenue neutral rate in their LOB, if the statewide mill levy increases, that would trigger a revenue neutral rate hearing? Is that your understanding?
My understanding is that what would be looked at is the total of the different school levies. So remember, there's not only the 20 mills and the LOB, there may be a bond and interest levy, there might be a capital outlay levy. So our understanding, it would be the total of all of those right now that would trigger this. And certainly that's one of the concerns, that districts might be pushed into this because the 20 mills went up and the district would have to have the hearing and the notice, even though they couldn't do anything about that.
And that's my concern on the 20 mills, is that since it is a statewide levy, technically under Senate Bill 13, the board would have to vote on that, whether or not they wanted to increase that amount, but their vote, whether they vote yay or nay, wouldn't have any impact. They would still have to levy the 20 mills.
That's our understanding now. I would note that there was an amendment proposed, as I understood it, to exempt the 20 mills in the Senate committee, but that amendment failed. But there was a proposal that would have taken the 20 mills out of how the school district revenue neutral rate would be calculated.
Okay. Thank you. We did have two different issues here, both with the date and the 20 mills. I just wanted to have a small discussion on that. Committee, are there further questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Committee, we also have written testimony from Dina Horst and Ben Jones, legislative liaisons for the Kansas State Board of Education. And we have neutral testimony from Trey Cocking. Is that verbal? Okay. Welcome to committee, Trey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. We just want to point out a couple of things with this bill. When it comes to property tax transparency, state of Kansas-wide, school districts make up 43% of the property taxes levied in the state of Kansas. So whatever the committee does, we just want to ensure that transparency lasts, and everybody understands their whole property tax bill, and it is not just, schools or cities and counties only, but it includes everybody, whatever we do, so people have that entire picture, especially with schools being at 43%. And then the other fun thing, I call it a fun thing, you guys may think not, but what I wanted to point out is what the tax neutral rate is on this 20 mills. Because if you guys pass this 20 mills, you will be raising taxes. At least that's what we are told. If we exceed, keep the mill levy the same and, levy a higher rate, tax neutral rate, then we'll be raising taxes at the local level. So this 20 mills, you guys would be raising taxes. In order to keep the taxes the same, you guys would need to levy 19.475 mills for 2022 and 19.015 mills for 2023. So almost a half mil decrease each year to keep the total amount of taxes the same. But we just wanted to point out what the tax neutral rate is because we will be under the same constraints, so we thought it was important for this committee. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cocking. And when I served on K-12 budget committee and we looked at this, I actually got some information from research since the 20 mills was implemented, and if we had had that revenue neutral rate, it was quite astounding. I don't have that in front of me, unfortunately, but it was quite disturbing.
My testimony does show how much it's grown from $601 million in FY 2016 to projected to be $770 million in FY 2023. And I want to be real clear. We're not saying it's a bad idea. Schools are completely important to our communities, but we just wanted to take this minute to point out what the tax neutral rate is in this case.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for this conferee? Yes, no, changed his mind. I'm sorry, I did not have WebEx up to see if there's any questions online. I do not see any, so if there are no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, I will. I guess I'm going to, one thing from their conversation earlier, I would point out something I raised when I testified originally on Senate Bill 13. Taxes in Kansas are due December 20th. It is December 31st everywhere else around us. If we had those 11 days, I think we could fix all of this by moving the entire schedule forward by 11 days. And it'd be a little more taxpayer friendly, giving them 11 more days to pay. But it would take care, you could move July 15th to July 26th and so on just by moving that due date back from the 20th to the 31st. So, but one of the things we can come back next year and talk about that because this year it really doesn't matter with how Senate Bill 13 is being implemented.
Thank you. Oh, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would like to remind everyone that the purpose behind Senate Bill 13 was to make tax increases transparent. And I just want to point out again that it doesn't mean that your taxpayers won't want to allow schools to continue raising what they get from that 20 mills, and they'll be okay with that. Whether or not they do, Doesn't mean you can't have that, but it does help the average taxpayer realize that when your valuations go up, your taxes actually go up because they're getting more money from you. So the purpose behind this bill was to educate taxpayers and give them the opportunity to make a choice. So as difficult as it may be, and might have to just rip the Band-Aid off and go ahead and do this and see how it works. Thank you very much.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I show no other proponents, opponents, or neutral testimony. Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of, what are we on? House Bill 2423. Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2423 and move on to our last item of business for the day, Senate Bill 70. We will open up the hearing, and I would turn first to the reviser for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 70 has one component that I believe the committee has seen before, an additional component that the committee would be new to the committee. The first, the one that's been seen before would be the exemption of certain rebates from the sale of motor vehicles. The sunset that's slated to expire on not having that sales tax exempt essentially is removed, which the bill, I believe this committee has already seen. That's included in this bill. The second component would be that the sales tax on third-party coupons, the bill would make those essentially not subject to sales tax. So if you go buy something with a coupon, a third party who would be reimbursing the retailer, that coupon, that discounted coupon would no longer be, that amount would no longer be subject to sales tax under the bill. It's not really an exemption. It's more of how the sales tax is calculated more than anything like that. So it's not really truly an exemption, but it's how it would be how the state would calculate sales tax. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sievers. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the fiscal note and turn to Department of Revenue if they would like to address anything on the fiscal note.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Kathleen Smith with the Department of Revenue. Senate Bill 70 would decrease state revenues by $6.2 million in fiscal year 2022. Of that amount, it would be $5.2 million to the state general fund and $1 million to the state highway fund. There are two provisions, as Adam provided, in the bill. The first one was the exclusion of the cash rebates on the vehicles. We do have a separate estimate, and you can see that in our fiscal note for that amount. And I think I went through this in the first bill that we heard. What we did to formulate our estimate is we looked at the new car sales, and I think we looked at 2018 and 19, and then we made some assumptions that maybe 50% of those vehicles would include a manufacturer's rebate. And then we made an assumption on the amount of the rebate, and those motor vehicle rebates do fluctuate. So we did come up with an estimate that is in the fiscal note that's been prepared by the Division of Budget for that. The next portion of the bill we have a fiscal note for that amount as well, with the exclusion on the manufacturer's coupons. What we did is we looked at the industry data on the coupons, the value of the coupons that have been redeemed, and applied that to Kansas to come up with our estimate of around, I think, $2 million in total. One thing that I do want to point out on the manufacturer's coupons, we reached out to our streamlined sales tax governing board with regards to the third party price reductions in the selling price. And if this piece stays in the bill, it has the potential to put us out of compliance with Streamline, which then has a potential for us to lose out on around $41 million that we are receiving through Streamline. So again, the motor vehicle rebates are good. We don't have any problems there, but with the manufacturer's coupons, we do have a problem with Streamline, and that does have a potential to put us out of compliance. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Committee, are there any questions for Department of Revenue? Seeing none, thank you for that, Kathleen. Oh,
I raised my hand. I'm not familiar with Streamline.
oh, yeah, Kathleen, would you take a few minutes and just kind of give us a broad overview of the Streamlined Sales Tax Act and our participation in that?
Sure. There's around 23 states that are part of the Streamline Sales Tax Governing Board. And what we are trying to do is simplify sales tax requirements for the industry, for the vendors, for the retailers that are out there. And so there are 23 states that have come together and have agreed on a bylaws and information that will be used by all of these states and applied to all of our retailers within all of those states that are participating in it.
That's a very concise explanation of the Streamline Act. Representative Turner, does that satisfy your question?
Thank you. That gives me 100% more than I knew before.
But well, and Body, this, as this looks familiar to you, this is the same as I believe it was House Bill 2143 that we worked in the House tax. We did not have the provision for the manufacturer's coupons, so this is something new that we're seeing as far as the Streamlined Sales Tax Act and the different fiscal note. Representative Baker?
Yeah, the fiscal note on the coupons looks pretty severe. I just wonder if we better think about shoving the clutch in on that. We don't want to get out of line with the Streamlined Sales Tax. That'd be real education. Just a thought.
Any other questions for Department of Revenue? Seeing none, we will move on to our proponent testimony and welcome to committee Don McNeely, President, Kansas Automobile Association. Welcome to committee, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll make this very short. As the chairman said, you've already heard essentially the portion of this bill in House Bill 2143, which of course you passed out of here a couple weeks ago, and then it passed the House under 19-4. We do appear in support of Senate Bill 70, specifically the portion of the bill addressing manufacturers' rebates and the sunset that's set for June 30th of this year. So I think when we did have the hearing on 2143, it was very thorough, so I'll forego the rest of my testimony. I did want to make mention or correct or address a statement that was made when you were debating 2143 on the floor. It was stated that the industry had failed to provide data or information. No such commitment was made by the industry to provide that data, as we do not collect data. If anyone was going to do that, it'd either be probably the Department of Revenue or actually the individual county treasurer's offices, as they're the ones that see the individual calculations on which sales tax is calculated. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. And I know you might not collect any data. I know that it probably makes a big difference along state lines when a buyer can easily go across a short distance and have a different option. Overall, do you think that this impacts, other than state lines, do you think this really impacts sales on automobiles purchases?
Yes, especially when you consider that new motor vehicle transactions are quickly approaching $40,000. Local combined sales tax rates are 8.5% to 10%. It does impact it. And as we talked before at the previous hearing, from times when these incentives come from the manufacturers, they give them an option of whether or not you want a rebate or special financing. A lot of manufacturers ran 0% financing for quite some time, and that was a very attractive incentive for the Kansas consumer in looking at a vehicle purchase.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Don. If you've lived here very long, you don't see as many new cars probably in Kansas as somewhere. Kansas ranks 43rd in vehicle property tax. Only 7 states charge more than we do. And 24 states have 0. anything we can do to get some new vehicles on the road, whatever they do, whatever you might lose in sales tax, it looks like you're sure in heck going to pick it up in property tax. So it would be nice to get some new paint on the road. So I hope to get this passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I remember that question on the floor, so I appreciate you proactively answering that. I guess I wonder, when it was originally set at a 5-year sunset, why was the sunset provision in there? What was
This was actually the second time, Representative, the sunset was put on. The first sunset was put on in 2006. It was a 3-year sunset. Never thought it would actually sunset. Well, it did. And then we've been working over the years and to make it permanent. And then when we passed it, almost 3 years ago, and it was done in tax conference committee in order to get it out of committee and on to both Senate and the House floor to pass.
So back to the point that was made on the floor, it wasn't for a purpose of seeing how this works, seeing if...
Well, I think that's what it was to ascertain, and but again, the industry, I mean, we do not have the ability to collect that data. The only ones that actually see the transactional data are the county treasurers at the time of registration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to appear on behalf of Senate Bill 70? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 70. And committee, I want to take a moment to address our work tomorrow. We have 2 days left before we're on the floor debating bills before first adjournment, and I would like to get as much work done as possible tomorrow. Bills on the agenda, I believe, are Senate Bill 147, 119, and Senate Bill 71. If time allows, and I will be working the bill that we heard today, 2423, I'll be working with some proponents and the Senate on what direction we need to go with that. But I would also like to take a look at working Senate Bill 70, bill we just heard, possibly House Bill 2423, and possibly House Bill 2414. Representative Baker.
Are you buying us all supper tomorrow night? Or are we going to stay all night?
Depends on how much you want to talk.
Bring it.
I'm sorry, that was inappropriate. Yeah, are there any questions? I want to make sure everyone has on their schedule what the possible action may be. So, seeing none, we will adjourn.